G'day YouTube, welcome back to the channel, welcome to the first video of 2024. Today we're going to be taking a look at some brand new equipment from Injora for the TRX4M. We're going to be converting our little grey Bronco here into the brand new Injora IR40 body set. We've also got some Injora brass steering knuckles and Injora brass wheels. So if you're interested in following along with this build, stick around, it's coming right up. Let's get a closer look at this body set and see what we're working with here. Straight up, we've got a small instruction sheet. Not a ton of information, just a few pictures, but it does look like it's got callouts for the required hardware length, which is always a nice touch. I opted for the grey paint scheme, which is a nice metallic paint. The body is actually really nicely detailed, plenty of molded in details as you can see. All of the latches up front here are blacked out, which is pretty cool. It's got a nice pinched or tapered front end there for plenty of tire clearance. All of our required hardware. This package looks like front grille, headlight buckets, front bumper, rear hinge and lights. And finally, we've got our cage assembly for the back of it. It's all really nicely packaged, which is typical with Injora stuff. I've got all of my parts laid out. I've organized the hardware by length, so it's a lot quicker to just grab the screw that I need. So let's put this thing together and see how it turns out. So just a really quick build note, attaching the cage assembly to the body. I followed the directions on the cage assembly, which clearly shows M1.4 by 8mm screws being utilized on the front of the cage. It also shows M1.4 by 6mm screws utilized at the rear of the cage. Now, that was all fine and everything came together really nicely. I hit a little bit of a snag when I went to attach the cage to the body. You can see in the directions here, it clearly shows M1.4 by 8mm screws for the cage to body attachment. However, when I went to attach the cage, all that was available left in the hardware kit were these 6mm screws. For some reason, my kit didn't have enough 8mm screws to do the cage and attach the cage as well. And at first I attached the cage to the body with these 6mm screws, and I just wasn't satisfied with the amount of thread engagement into that cage there. So the screw has to pass through this little bracket which holds the window assembly in at the rear there, and it passes through the body itself and then into the cage, and it only felt like it grabbed in by about 2 or 3 threads. I wasn't really satisfied with the amount of thread engagement that I had there. So I had to raid my screw kit for another 6 M1.4 by 8mm screws, and I've utilized those 8mm screws in this attachment area here, and I feel like there's a lot more thread passing into this cage assembly. And I've also utilized them. I couldn't tell in the instructions if they wanted me to put screws in here, but there is a spot for screws down here. And again, I've used that 8mm length screw to pass through the cage and into the body there. And everything seems nice and secure. I found it a little bit odd that the instructions called for 8mm screws in this area here, but there wasn't enough 8mm screws in the kit to do that. I'm up to the point in the instructions where I'm about to attach the body onto the chassis assembly with this rear hinge. Now, taking a close look at this instruction sheet, it clearly shows that bracket being installed. Let's see if we can get everything lined up. It clearly shows that bracket being installed in this orientation. And that would place it in the chassis like so. However, if you line up that rear hinge, you can clearly see that the front will not latch correctly. So that image definitely appears to be a mistake, and moving that bracket around like so appears to get everything lined up correctly. After getting the body successfully attached to the chassis, I'm almost certain that that is a typo in the directions, incorrectly showing the orientation of that rear hinge assembly. When installed as shown here, the latch at the front bumper lines up perfectly and works correctly, and the body sits nice and level on the chassis. So I believe that that is the intended orientation of that bracket. Just ignore the instructions. I think there's a small mistake there. That's the body and cage assembly complete. The proportions of this cab look really nice on the TRX4M wheelbase. I really like the design of this thing. Again, that body super detailed. The grille assembly is pretty plain, and I think what I'll do is cut out a vinyl sticker and put a bit of a Toyota logo up the front there. I think that'll give a lot more detail to the front end and really improve the looks of things. Off camera, I'm going to install these Injora brass wheels. They've got a nice offset to them, so it should bring the width of the axles out a little bit. I'll also get these brass knuckles installed, and we're going to be using the LGRP Trench Kings. These are the larger 63mm size. There you have the completed build. I'm absolutely loving the way this thing looks. I really like the metallic silver paint scheme against these dark grey Injora brass beadlock wheels. I'll try to leave links to all of this stuff in the description down below if you're interested in checking it out. This is a pretty inexpensive way to completely change up the looks of your TRX4M. It's also a great way to really push the performance of the TRX4M, allowing you to run much larger tyres and have a significant increase in approach and departure angles. So let's get this thing out onto the rocks, let's see how it performs, and then we'll come back to the workbench and we'll share our final thoughts on the IR40 body set for the TRX4M. So as you can see, this thing is really capable out on the rocks. These larger tires giving extra diff clearance. It handles most obstacles with ease, and it looks really good doing it. I think at around 30 bucks for the body set, it represents a really good value. It's a great opportunity to change the looks, increase the performance of the TRX4M. There's a couple of small details that I'm not in love with. I think the front grille is a little bit boring. I think Injora could have done a little bit more molding in some detail there. Also, the mirrors, which are a rigid plastic, they're a friction fit into the body. I'd like to see manufacturers starting to mold these things out of silicone or rubber or something more flexible, so they're not as prone to damage while you're out on the rocks. And the final thing that I'm not in love with is the exposed ESC and exposed wiring back here. It takes away a little bit from the scale looks. It is kind of nice having access to the battery connector without having to lift up the body, but I think with all those wires sort of sticking out back there, it does take away from that scale appeal. You could probably use maybe a cargo net or some scale accessories to disguise that a little bit if it bothered you. Not a deal breaker, but something worth noting. I really like the hinged body style. The way they've done that body is excellent. It's really easy to live with. One clip at the front, so that's a really nice touch. That's where we're going to wrap things up for today. Leave a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on this new IR40 body set from Injora for the TRX4M. I'm interested to know what everybody thinks about this new body style. If it's something that you're interested in purchasing, is it something that you like the looks of? As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you got any value out of today's video, please consider subscribing to the channel, and I'll catch you next time.